Welcome to Books for the Back Porch. I'm Matt, and today we're talking Sing Her Down by Ivy Pochoda, what I hope to read for the summer, and my most anticipated book for 2025. Published in 2023, Sing Her Down is Ivy Pochoda's fifth book and an award-winning novel that centers on violence in women, told through a genre mashup of a crime thriller, a western, and literary fiction. Does that sound familiar to you at all? Maybe it calls to mind Cormac McCarthy, who is often mentioned in the press for this book. And I won't deal with the Cormac McCarthy side of things, but let's take a look at that first sentence and dive into Sing Her Down. Let me tell you a story. That's not me getting ready to start a rant. That's the opening sentence of this book, and I hung my head pretty quickly when I read that. Suffice to say, it is not my favorite opening line of a book. And it further disappointed me when the next two lines are so much better and hooked me just as quickly as that first sentence made me want to drop the book. Those next lines, I know everybody's story. Been collecting them for years, a goddamn library of voices filed away in my head. That got me good. It had me asking questions immediately. How do you know everyone's story? Who does usually know everyone's story? Is this some omnipotent person? Why are you collecting these stories? It also doesn't sound like they're thrilled to be collecting these stories. So why are they keeping them still? Who typically hears voices in their head? All of these different thoughts and questions that I've had are rattling around in my head from those first three sentences. So why did Ivy Pochoda decide to use the more cliche, let me tell you a story, instead of starting with the next two lines? The best I could come up with is it establishes two central points of the book. One, we're using a Greek chorus type narrator for part of the book. And two, stories, especially when told by somebody, are often embellished. And maybe that means we're going to be having some level of unreliable narration going on throughout this book. So what is the story that's being told to us? It's ultimately about three women, plus the woman who acts as the Greek chorus with the help of the voices in her head. And it's about the violence that they have or have not perpetrated, and the reasons, or lack thereof, for it. I get that's kind of a mouthful of back and forth wishy-washy. And get used to it, because that ambiguity is throughout the entire book. We start in a prison where Florida, a rich white woman, and Dios, a working-class, well-educated Mexican-American woman, are serving time. How they view each other's roles in the crimes they committed becomes a central point, especially with Dios wanting Florida to embrace the violence within herself and admit to herself that she really played a big part in a murder. Dios is obsessed with Florida, making her admit this, and with Florida in general. And Dios losing agency in her life because of rich white women is a recurring theme for Dios in her life. Both of them end up finding themselves receiving an early release unexpectedly in the middle of 2020, for obvious reasons, and the cat and mouse game between Florida and Dios really begins once they're out of prison. There's a somewhat public murder that one of them commits. They don't do it in a public setting where they get caught, but it's left in a public way that people quickly find the body. And that's where we get our third main character, Detective Lobos, and they begin the trail of getting onto Florida and Dios. And Lobos adds another woman who is struggling to come to grips with the own violence in her life and the inaction she took during it, despite her training as a detective. And the cat and mouse game just continues on along. We have Dios looking to catch up with Florida. We have Lobos trying to find Dios or Florida. And we've got Florida trying to escape both of them. It's billed as a Western. And it's stated in the first chapter, in case you couldn't draw the conclusion already, that we're heading to a final epic standoff between the characters. And I'll use epic to fill in however epic you want to make that be. But the questions and themes that Ivy Pochoda brings up about things in this book, such as women being just as violent as men for no reason, which is a huge theme in this book, classism, racism within classism, predestination, mental illness, how society treats the undomiciled, art itself, abuse. All of these are wide-ranging and play huge parts, and I honestly wish she scaled that back a little. There's a lot that she's throwing at the wall here, and sometimes it kind of feels like it's that first novel where the writer has all of these ideas and they're afraid that they're not going to be able to get a second book to put them all in it, so they put them all in one book. And this is Pochoda's 5th book. She's got a 6th one coming out. She is a great writer. I just wish she saved some of those ideas for a separate book because they start detracting from each other. I will say one positive of this book is that every character feels like themselves. You can tell whose head you're in and whose story you're listening to just by the tone and the voice of each person. No two characters feel the same at all. And yes, there are chapter headers. So when you're reading a Lobos chapter, it will tell you. When you're reading a Dios chapter, it tells you. Honestly, they could have gotten away with that. They could have wiped that out completely because you know instantly, just by the way the character thinks and talks to others, immediately who you're interacting with. And I've read books by higher acclaimed authors who really struggle to separate characters as much through voice and prose the way that Ivy Pochoda does here. Would I recommend this book to others? That's a bit of a tough question. It is at times uneven, with the parts in prison being a bit tougher to get through for me than the other parts were. Once they're out of prison, the book really starts rolling for me, especially with the addition of Detective Lobos. What I would suggest is that if the idea of this book, the themes of this book sound interesting to you, pick it up, flip through some of the chapters, read a couple of them, and if you like the way that Dios is written, if you like the way that Florida is written, if you enjoy the Greek chorus of Case, you're going to love this book because that's going throughout the entire book. You know, you're going to be in those characters' shoes a lot. However, if you read the first couple of chapters and you're just not vibing with that writing style, you're going to want to put the book down and look elsewhere. That being said, I would read Ivy Pochoda again. I just think this wasn't the book for me. Maybe I went in with too high of hopes, thinking it was going to be somewhat Western, somewhat of a crime thriller. And maybe I just wasn't really vibing with the way that she wrote some of the characters, despite the themes and the thought-provoking questions she was bringing up really being interesting to me. So maybe down the road, I'll get to some of her other stuff. I know the book before Sing Her Down, I think it was called These Women. That was supposed to be an award-winning noir. Maybe I'll check that one out down the road. So, what do I have on deck? I'm going to start Eli Craner's Ozark Dogs. I don't really know a whole lot about this book. Gabino Iglesias of The Devil Takes You Home blurbed it on the back. That stood out to me, as did Megan Abbott blurbing it on the back. That stood out to me. And I really enjoyed Craner's debut novel, Don't Know Tough. So that's enough for me. You know, I'll take a chance on that and see how it goes. You know, I'm always in the mood for a good kind of rural southern noir. And that seems to be Craner's wheelhouse, and I'll keep going until it doesn't work for me. In the whole, I'm probably going to be reading Riders of the Purple Sage by Zane Grey. It's a classic written in the early 1900s. I have never gotten around to it, but I would love to read it. Just not sure if that is truly going to be what I go with after Ozark Dogs, because my most anticipated read of 2025 is coming out later this week, which is S.A. Cosby's King of Ashes. I'm told that I have to wait until Father's Day to get my copy, so I won't be able to start until the 15th. So I need to find that right book that will take me between Ozark Dogs and when that gets finished to King of Ashes. But Cosby is one of my favorite authors, or probably is my favorite author writing today. Him, maybe Attica Locke. That's a pretty neck and neck battle for me. But I cannot rave enough about the books by Cosby that I've read. Blacktop Wasteland, Razorblade Tears, and All the Sinners Bleeds. Books you need to read. Do yourself a favor. Go out to your local bookstore, go to your library, and pick these books up because they are incredible. I don't know if there's a better 3-stretch run of novels than Blacktop Wasteland, Razorblade Tears, and All the Sinners Bleed. So I'm going in with super high hopes for King of Ashes, and I can't wait to get that. Like I said, that's been my most anticipated of 2025. and I've been counting down since S.A. Cosby announced that he was writing this book back in early stages of 2024. So I do want to find that right book to get me between Ozark Dogs and that. I don't like to have multiple books going at the same time. I can pull that off a little bit if I'm doing fiction and nonfiction, but 2 fiction books typically end up going with whatever one's grabbing me most. I just continually read while that other one just gets dropped to the wayside. And I don't want to do that, and I definitely don't want to do that to something like Riders of the Purple Sage. So maybe I'll go with some short stories, maybe I'll go with another short book somewhere in between to bridge that gap. Somebody else that I've been really looking forward to reading that I hope to get to this summer is Dennis Lehane. He's one of those authors that I've just heard so much about, and I just haven't read him yet. I owned a copy of Mystic River for years. I think I picked that up shortly after the movie came out, and that was early 2000s. And I just, for whatever reason, never got around to reading it. So eventually, having to continually downsize books, dealing with that competing small bookshelf space, Dennis Lehane got donated. But I've been looking to get back into him and checking him out. So if you've read any Dennis Lehane, and you know of a good jumping on point, maybe it's Mystic River, maybe it's something different, let me know. Put it in the comments and let me know of where I should start with Dennis Lehane. For instance, I know Small Mercies, his most recent book that came out a couple of years, had a lot of buzz about that. Maybe I should jump in there. Maybe I should start in the middle of the series, because that's when it starts getting good. I know he also did Shutter Island. I think that I had a copy of that at one point as well that just never got around to getting read. So if you know where I should start with Dennis Lehane, drop it in the comics, and I'll get around to it. All right, that's all the books that I've got to talk about today for Books for the Back Porch, but I'll see you next week.